Bitcoin, crypto, Wall Street Bets, GameStop, Steve Cohen, Robinhood app, and David Portnoy calling for everyone to go to jail? What is even going on? Even if you don't understand what's going on, you're seriously living under a rock if you don't know about the biggest financial market story of 2021. With Bitcoin surging, Robinhood app halting trading of certain securities like GameStop, and now calls for regulations to prevent retail investors from coordinating on social media, many, including Elon Musk, are now arguing the case for cryptocurrencies only grows stronger. Keeping all this in mind, there's no better time for us to talk to Bitcoin expert Travis Kling. We discuss what Bitcoin is, the case for it, and why Travis, a relatively risk-averse guy, has decided to make a career out of Bitcoin in spite of the potential risks. So if you want to learn about Bitcoin, hear the case for it, or otherwise get inspired, check out this first Fire 2021 episode of Lawflip.
Law flip, objection, your honor. Turn the game upside down. Law flip, objection, your honor. Turn the game upside down.
Welcome to Lawflip. It's a conversation about law, life, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and everything in between. I'm Benji Smith. So this is the first episode of 2021. We're going to be doing it every month. So we're going to be releasing episodes on the first of every month. We were doing it for every week. I got burnt out. I want to put a focus and emphasis on the right guest and to make it the right thing for you guys to listen to. So if you're new to the show, I'm a lawyer, entrepreneur, and I like to have people on that inspire me and that I respect. And this guest is one of those people. So he's known to me as being someone who knows more about Bitcoin than pretty much anyone. He's the founder and chief investment officer of Ikigai.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Wow. People don't get that right the first time very often.
Asset Management, a cryptocurrency asset management firm. Excited to have Travis Kling on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So to the listeners, please go subscribe on YouTube and all the socials everywhere. We have a phone number where if you can call us for any legal questions whatsoever, it's 1-833-LAW-FLIP. Let's flip the game upside down. So before we get into the whole cryptocurrency Bitcoin thing, where'd you grow up?
Grew up in Texas, College Station. College town where Texas A&M is.
Okay, and then you went to Texas A&M.
Went to Texas A&M, went to a junior college my freshman and sophomore year, played football there, and then transferred to A&M and graduated from A&M.
Did you play football at A&M too or no?
Hurt my back my sophomore year in college and couldn't play football anymore.
Was that devastating?
Yeah, at the time it was.
Yeah. So then you graduate and then you go into traditional finance, right?
Yeah, so undergrad in accounting, master's in finance, kind of did it all together in 5 years, got out in 2008, went into investment banking, oil and gas, M&A specifically in Houston. The financial crisis was my first handful of months out of college, basically.
Yeah.
First handful of months on the job. Fun fact, my whole career before crypto was in energy investing, primarily oil and gas, some power and alternatives. But and I always like to tell people my first week of my professional career was the all-time high in oil prices. Mm-hmm. So WTI was $145 a barrel the week that I started in summer 2008.
And so what did that mean for you?
I stepped in and it was going gangbusters in terms of the amount of activity that was going on. And then that was July 2008. And obviously there was, the dominoes were falling in real time in terms of what was about to happen with the financial markets and the kind of global economy as a whole. And then, kind of one thing after another. And I was 22 years old, 23 years old. And you didn't really have a frame of reference for how crazy that period of time was because you're just kind of too young to understand it. You knew it was really crazy, but you kind of didn't know how crazy.
Yeah, I got out of law school in 2008. And it was awful. Nobody can get a job.
Right. No jobs. Yeah.
So, but notwithstanding, you stuck it out in the traditional finance career. And then 3 or 4 years ago, you made your move. But before you made your move, what was it about the traditional finance world that wasn't doing it for you?
So I left investment banking, went to work for a hedge fund in Chicago, did that for 4.5 years, had a lot of success there. Left in the middle of 15, moved to New York, went to work for a hedge fund called Point 72, run by a guy named Steve Cohen, pretty famous guy.
Yeah. And
that was fine. And I thought that was what my career was going to be. And I was fine with that. I definitely did some soul searching. like people tell you that money's not going to make you happy. And like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23-year-old Travis was like, had heard that his whole life. And it's kind of like, okay, yeah, I'll figure that out when I get there kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then I think in my kind of mid to late 20s, I started understanding what people meant by that. And it took me a while to kind of figure out what to do with that, I think. And the conclusion that I came to was, well, if I have a skill set, if I'm good at something that the world has decided you can make a good living doing, that doesn't necessarily help that many people, right? The world does not need another hedge fund manager at all. That if you make a bunch of money, you need to give it all away.
Yeah.
And that was kind of how I was approaching it. Cause
so you haven't gone away from making as much money as possible. It's just that you're going to do something that you believe in with the money.
That was my thinking at the time. When I was at Point72, and then here comes crypto.
Right.
Yeah.
What is cryptocurrency? What is it, and why do new ones keep popping up?
The term cryptocurrency is a misnomer. We use crypto assets, or just crypto for short, because there's actually very few cryptos that you would consider a money that have the characteristics of a money. Bitcoin is a money.
Is Bitcoin going to be used in grocery stores and all that?
So a money is a store of value, a method of exchange, and a unit of account. That's like the definition of money. I always like to say that Bitcoin is too good at storing value right now to be a good method of exchange right now. So what will probably end up happening is you'll store, and not to get down the rabbit hole too quickly here, but you'll end up sort of storing your wealth in Bitcoin, and then you will have like a line of credit that's collateralized by that Bitcoin in either what's called a stable coin, which is like a cryptocurrency that's pegged to $1. And then you'll spend that, and there'll be some interest rate charged on that. And that's what you'll use at the grocery store. And as long as you pay that off plus a little bit of interest, then you get to keep all your Bitcoin.
Interesting.
And that's probably what's going to end up happening. Yeah.
From an ideological standpoint, why do you believe in Bitcoin?
So it's important to note that I'm not a tech investor, and I'm not a tech guy. Like, I'm not a tech guy. I'm just not. I never have been in my whole life. I think Alexa's big brother. I've never written a line of code in my life. And so all that's like kind of important. First time I heard about Bitcoin was when Silk Road got shut down in late 2013. I was reading about it from a fascination perspective. Like these drug dealers made this magic internet money to buy drugs on the internet. That's wild. Early 2014, Mt. Gox, which was the major exchange, the Bitcoin exchange at the time, had this massive hack. I remember reading about that, and I remember thinking like, oh man, good thing I didn't buy any Bitcoin, because I'm sure I probably would have got it all stolen on this thing, because I didn't know what I was doing. Stopped paying attention to it in early 14. Late 2016, the price hit $1,000 again. It popped back up on my radar. I started reading into it a little bit. I got into the subreddits in the Bitcoin talk forums in late 16, and I remember being amazed that this thing had not died after taking a shot the magnitude of Mt. Gox, like just this tremendously devastating thing to happen to this thing.
That being the hack.
Yeah, the hack. Yeah. I mean, they stole in current Bitcoin value terms, it's the largest theft in human history. And so I was just amazed that it wasn't dead after all that. And that really kind of caught my interest. I've read most of Nassim Taleb stuff. So like the term anti-fragility started kind of popping up in terms of that, which, we can get into that later, but anti-fragility is one of Bitcoin's strongest characteristics. And then early 17, Ethereum and all the ICOs started going crazy. That popped up on my radar. Started reading more about smart contracts and how to think through some of that. I read the Bitcoin white paper in May of 2017. I fell down the proverbial crypto rabbit hole in summer of 2017. Started spending all my time reading about crypto, go to the gym, listen to a crypto podcast, go home, sit on the couch in the dark till 2 o'clock in the morning, read about crypto, wake up, do it all over again. And I had to start at the very beginning, because I didn't know anything about cryptography and nothing about computer science. Had a graduate degree in finance, always liked game theory and mechanism design. So that hooked me in pretty quickly. Bitcoin's mechanism design is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen when you really actually understand it. And as 50 hours of self-study turned into 100, turned into 2 and then 300, I just kept coming across revolutionary concept after revolutionary concept. And when I say that, I would sort of like read something about Bitcoin or smart contracts, and I would say, I'm pretty sure that this has never existed before. And I just kept kind of stacking these up. And the conclusion that I came to after about 300 hours of self-study was that it seemed incredibly unlikely that the world, and this is sort of like a backwards way to think about it, but it was how I thought about it. It seemed like it was incredibly unlikely that the world was going to come to the conclusion that all of this stuff didn't matter at all.
Didn't mean anything. Yeah.
Didn't matter at all. And at the time, in summer of 2017, it was going crazy, dude. And there was not nearly the same bifurcation of the crypto asset ecosystem to understand the use cases and the value proposition of one crypto versus another. BTC versus Ethereum versus Litecoin versus VeChain versus Dragon, all of that, Ripple, all this stuff.
It was just all the same.
You kind of knew different things were doing this, that, and the other, but like the value propositions were not nearly as well sort of like siloed as they are now. And so I didn't have that good of understanding about which one was going to win or this, that, and the other, but I was just like, this is going to be a big deal. So I walked into my boss's office one day, late September 2017, out of the blue, and I said, look, this crypto thing, I think it's going to be a really big deal. I think it's the biggest deal since the internet the first time around. And I think that means it's probably the investment opportunity of a generation. And I don't want to be an equity long short portfolio manager anymore. I'm going to make a career change. They actually had me stick around for another couple months and talk to them about what a crypto business would look like inside of Point72. So that gave me a chance to do another like couple hundred hours of research on crypto for a bunch of different reasons. It didn't make sense for them to do a crypto business inside of Point72 at the time, primarily regulatory related. Yeah. At that time, there's a lot of regulatory uncertainty. So a lot of that's gotten cleared up since then, but at the time there's a high degree of uncertainty. So I left Point72 December 17, to go pursue kind of crypto full time. Wasn't dead set on starting my own fund. Coming from traditional hedge fund investing, I was acutely aware of what a tremendous pain in the ass it is to start your own hedge fund. And it was never something that was like a lifelong goal for me. Like I didn't want to have TK Capital or whatever. It wasn't a goal of mine.
But was this a personal, really scary risk for you?
Yes. Yeah, it was. But and I'm a pretty risk averse person, which sounds hilarious to a guy that runs a crypto hedge fund, right? I know, and people tell me that a lot, but I really am. I'm risk averse as a person in terms of like, I would never go skydiving. I would never go bungee jumping. I don't like to gamble. I've never bet on a horse. I've never been to a horse track. I've never bet on a sporting event with a bookie in my life. Yeah. Like That's
crazy.
I know. Right. And then and people think of hedge fund investing as a very risk seeking career. On the spectrum of like quote unquote hedge fund bros, like I'm definitely over on the like risk averse side and deployed capital kind of accordingly in my career, in the manner in which I kind of, the different strategies that I ran and things like that. But sometimes I see things and they seem like they're incredibly risky. And this is, I don't know, I think it's kind of happened a few other times maybe in my life, but like sometimes I see stuff and I'm like, that's a really good bet. And I thought it was a very, very good bet because I thought it was tremendously unlikely that this whole thing, not anything specifically, but the whole thing wasn't going to be a really big deal. And it seemed like it was very early.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was early enough. And I was like, I remember thinking at the time, because I was actually considering going to a project, like going and like, find a crypto that I loved and be like, hey, let me run all of the business. I'm not going to write a line of code, but let me run all the operations or whatever. Pay me in a shitload of tokens. If this thing hits, like great, whatever. It turns out great, right? And I remember thinking at the time, even if I end up at Hotmail, if you were one of the first 50 employees at Hotmail, I bet things turned out really well for you because you left Hotmail and you got some sick job at some internet place or you started a VC firm or whatever you did and things ended up great because you were right at the front lines at the beginning kind of deal. And that's how I was.
So it wasn't, so in your mind, you de-risked it as much as possible.
Yeah.
Or it was a de-risk situation to the extent that it could be. So Donald Trump famously tweeted, "I don't like Bitcoin. It's too It's too volatile." And
backed by nothing.
Backed by nothing. And it is volatile.
Yeah.
Right. And it's been volatile. Why it?
Yeah, price is up 300% since he tweeted that, by the way, just for the record.
Okay, fair. But why is it not this volatile, out of thin air type of thing?
It is volatile. The realized volatility of Bitcoin has been declining meaningfully over its history, and there's every expectation that's going to continue. And eventually it will have a volatility that approaches traditional asset classes.
Yeah.
And it's getting there. In fact, over a significant portion of 2020, which was a crazy year in financial markets, the realized volatility of Bitcoin was about the same as the FANG stocks. Yeah, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google.
Okay.
So first, what is Bitcoin? And it's kind of hard because if you ask 10 different Bitcoiners, you're probably going to get 10 different answers.
Right.
And for people that don't know a lot about the space, that's part of what makes it hard to approach. So this is how I define Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a non-sovereign, hard-capped supply, global, immutable, decentralized, digital store of value. That's 6 adjectives. That's a lot of adjectives.
Yeah.
But each one of those is important. Non-sovereign, not controlled by any government, not controlled by any corporation or any entity. There is no Bitcoin company. There is no Bitcoin CEO.
That's attractive.
It exists on 10,000 computers spread out all over the world. It's
That's
open.
scary and just there's something about that that's uncomfortable.
It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy, right? And it's open source software code, so anybody in the world can look at the software code that those 10,000 plus computers have decided to run.
We like that.
So non-sovereign, hard-capped supply.
The 21,
The
what is it?
21 million. So there's
Yeah.
ever going to be 21 million ever created. There's 18.5 million that have already been created.
Is there some mechanism that actually will enforce that that's going to be
Oh
the
yeah,
case?
yeah, it's in the open source software code.
Okay.
Yeah, so anybody in the world can go look at the software code and you see exactly how the code is written. That means that only 21 million are ever going to be created.
Okay.
And when people say, like, what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a particular open source software code that the world decides to run and call Bitcoin. I can take that open source software code. Because it's open source, I can hit copy and paste. I can change that 21 million to 25 million and call it Travis Coin and try and convince the whole world that this is better than Bitcoin.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
What are the rest of the 6 components?
Yeah. So non-sovereign, hard cap supply,
Yeah.
global, all
Yeah.
over the world, borderless,
Yeah.
everything like that. Immutable,
Yes or no? Is it going to become the global currency?
the world reserve currency, you mean?
Yeah.
There's a significant possibility. That's a multi-decade. That's
Okay.
that's probably a 20-year plus type of deal.
Okay, so global, keep going.
Global, immutable, which is that one's very important as well too. You can never reverse a transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain ever.
I've heard that. All right, I'm a novice.
Yeah.
I've heard that you could see every transaction, but they
Correct.
remove the identities of the people. How does that not make it conducive to fuckery?
It's what we call pseudo-anonymous. So you
Yeah.
can see every Bitcoin that ever moves, and all of the history of that is also publicly available. So
Who has the access to the actual underlying data of the actual people?
it's kept track by the 10,000 computers around the world.
Okay, so let's say something happens. Who can get access to that, or can nobody get access to it?
Like if we have some kind of crazy solar flare and the
Sure.
internet completely goes out. Yeah, so Bitcoin could not run without the internet. That's correct.
Okay, there's a terrorist attack, and the FBI needs to get the name of the transaction that I did with my producer Ariane.
Yeah.
Nobody can track the name Benjamin Smith or Ariane Tabibian down.
Yeah, so there's an entire field of quantitative study around this called wallet forensics or chain analysis, as in analyzing the blockchain. There are 3 or 4 companies. The largest company is called Chainalysis, which is like chain and analysis put together, Chainalysis, and they just raised it $1 billion valuation to give you a sense of, and the vast majority of their revenue is from 3-letter agencies from the United States.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
so immutable.
Global, immutable, decentralized.
Okay, why is that important?
Exists on 10,000 computers all around the world, cannot be shut down by a government. You can't haul the CEO to jail, everything like that. Very famously, nobody knows who created the Bitcoin white paper. Is it
Nakashi, what is it?
Satoshi Nakamoto, which is a pseudonym. Nobody knows who it is. You can kind of narrow it down probably to about half a dozen or a dozen folks, but people don't actually know who it is, which is really crazy.
It's just, I never understood like the Banksy. I never understand how in 2021 that actually happens. I just don't really get it. So is there any other of the 6?
Non-sovereign, hard cap supply, global, immutable, decentralized, digital.
Okay.
There's no physical Bitcoin. It exists entirely digital, store of value, which is the noun of what it actually is. It is a store of value.
Okay, so Trump also said that it leads to illegal behavior, drug trade. I'm asking for a friend, but like, what about Bitcoin makes it useful to hide illegal transactions?
So cash is way better. Cash is way better to buy and sell drugs. And you can ask a drug dealer, or you can ask a drug enforcement agent. It's much easier to catch a bad guy using Bitcoin than it is a bad guy using cash. Yeah.
We hear about this a lot, about this currency devaluation, right?
Yep.
And that's one of the great benefits of Bitcoin. Could you explain to a second grader, what is it? Why is that the reason that Bitcoins of the world make sense?
So that's the second part of what is Bitcoin.
Yeah.
The first is non-sovereign, hard cap supply, global, immutable, decentralized digital store of value. The second part is it is an insurance policy against monetary and fiscal policy irresponsibility from central banks and governments globally.
Is this like sort of like, what is just like the 2008 crash? Obviously, it's a bunch of fiscal irresponsibility.
Correct.
And so we're pumping so much money into our respective governments.
Correct.
And the euro and U.S. money. That's not going to happen because there's a cap, among other things.
The more you know about monetary history, the better you will understand Bitcoin.
Okay.
And you can probably just, we don't have to go down that. I can go all the way down that rabbit hole, the monetary history rabbit hole. But
just on a top level.
Yeah. So on a top level, what we are doing right now is the largest monetary experiment in human history. And that is not hyperbole, that is unequivocal fact. And by that, I mean quantitative easing while simultaneously running increasingly larger deficits on top of increasingly untenable debt levels. Quantitative easing is the money printing that everybody talks about. But that money printing by way of quantitative easing does not explicitly get into the hands of everyday people. Instead, it's sort of shuffling that happens in the financial markets.
Right.
But it makes asset prices go up. Quantitative easing makes asset prices go up. It does not really cause CPI inflation. Like, it doesn't make the cost of your socks go up or eggs at the grocery store go up. Quantitative easing is a monetary policy, which is how is money created. And then the Rubicon that we crossed in 2020 was on the fiscal policy side, which is how do you spend the money? And that's checks in the mail to people. And so Bitcoin is an insurance policy against monetary and fiscal policy irresponsibility from central banks who control monetary policy and governments who control fiscal policy. And when you go back and read all of your monetary history, and I'm not trying to sound like a doomer. I've just read it all. So you
think that the general financial markets, the old traditional stuff, it's going to collapse? Not
necessarily. Or it may take a very long time, much longer, not this decade or the decade after. I really don't know exactly how it's going to play out. But what I can tell you is that anytime any government historically has ever done anything close to this magnitude, it has led to collapse, with one exception, which is Japan. And we don't have to get into the differences, the nuances as to why Japan was able to sort of do some of the stuff that they did. But it is not necessarily going to collapse. The dollar or the euro's in way worse shape than dollar. I can promise you that. The yen is in worse shape. TBD on the renminbi. But, if you can buy hurricane insurance, you buy it when the likelihood of a hurricane is increased. You don't wait until, the hurricane is, knocking on your doorstep to buy the hurricane insurance.
Sell it then.
Yeah, they won't sell it then, or it's going to be incredibly expensive.
Sure.
Right? Which kind of brings us back to sort of Bitcoin's price action as of late.
Some consumer questions. I put out an Instagram story asking people to throw some questions my way. So one of my friends, a lot of us, including those that are sophisticated, want to invest because of the big increases, but don't want to lose our shirts due to a lack of understanding. Like, what do the big players know that we don't know?
A lot. Yeah, and you shouldn't attempt to. The first thing I'll say is this is not investment advice.
Yeah,
so that's important.
Absolutely. And we're on a legal podcast, so you got to make sure.
This is not investment advice. So depending on your age, depending on your risk tolerance, I tell people 2 to 5% of their liquid net worth into Bitcoin. If you want to do a little bit into Ethereum, I'm okay with that. Something like a 90-10, 80-20 split BTC ETH. Anything down market cap, anything outside of BTC and ETH, you need to understand you are going to the horse track. You're going to the horse track. And you're going to the horse track and you're betting with people that know so much more about horses than you can ever hope to know.
It's like going to the casino and trying to play poker with people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you make money, that's fine, but don't confuse that with being smart or knowing what you're doing.
It's a mistake. Yeah. You made money.
Yeah. BTC is different.
Yeah.
ETH is much more experimental than BTC, which is an important differentiator as well too. Yeah. But I tell people 2 to 5% of their liquid net worth.
That's helpful though.
And with where we are right now in this cycle, which is to say there's every expectation in Bitcoin, it's up almost 40% in January.
Yeah.
It was up 160% in Q4 of last year. It was up 300% or something in 2020. So we're at this point in the cycle where in a lot of times over the last 12, 18, 24 months, when people ask me this question, I go, buy 2 to 5% today. Buy it right now. I can't tell you to do that right now because of just kind of where we are.
Yeah.
So instead you kind of have a couple options. One is just wait until it pulls back. We just had a 28% pullback. Look, there's volatility to this thing. Wait for it to pull back 10%, buy some. If it pulls back another 10%, buy some more, that kind of thing. Or on Coinbase, which is the most popular app to buy Bitcoin with, you can set automatic weekly buys. And you can just think through, okay, I'm trying to get up to 20 grand of this thing.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to buy, whatever, $200 a week for the next 10 weeks.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm going to do it like that.
Okay. What are the chances that Bitcoin in 2021 hits $100,000 per Bitcoin? This is from my friend, really smart guy, Sam Malai. He says 95% chance.
It's lower than that, but it's probably a little over 50%.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
There's something trending where it says by 2025, right? So in 4 years, there's someone's estimating that each Bitcoin is going to be worth $1 million.
One way to think about this, to bring this back to the monetary thing for a second.
Because if that's true,
think about it like this: $1 million per Bitcoin. It's not a numerator problem; it is a denominator problem.
Explain.
And you need to understand that it's a dollar problem. The dollar, 22% of all dollars ever created were created in 2020.
That's crazy.
Crazy. And it's unequivocally set to continue. We've got a blue wave, right? We have a democratically controlled Senate, House, and White House now. You've got Jay Powell that's still running the Fed. You've got a former Fed chair, Janet Yellen, that is now going to be Treasury Secretary. And you are doing, does the term modern monetary theory mean anything to you? MMT for short?
Honestly, it doesn't for me.
It's fine. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole. Universal basic income means something to you, right? Yeah. So MMT is basically the monetary policy that you need to do in order to put UBI in effect.
Okay.
And every central bank around the world is racing to see who can devalue their currency the fastest. And if they're all racing to see who can devalue their currency the fastest, what are they devaluing against? They're devaluing against things that have provable scarcity. Gold has provable scarcity. Bitcoin is even more provably scarce than gold. And this gets into Austrian economics type of stuff. But in Austrian economics terms, Bitcoin is the hardest money in human history. That 21 million supply cap, in the history of civilization, we have never had a money or anything like that where you had an absolutely assured cap on the supply. And so all this price action, right? There's a lot of beauty to this, the price action of Bitcoin. January 3rd, 2009, the first block on the Bitcoin blockchain is mined. Every 10 minutes, a new block is mined. And the Bitcoin blockchain has been doing that exact same thing. And I'll unpack that just a little bit further. I send you some Bitcoin, you send, whoever some Bitcoin, so on and so forth. A couple thousand of those transactions, they get put in a line, in a queue. While they're in line, $20 billion plus worth of extremely specialized computer equipment spread out all across the world races to solve an extremely difficult math problem, a cryptographic math problem. They're all racing to solve that math problem. The first computer that solves a math problem telegraphs to all the other computers, hey, I solved the math problem. All the rest of the computers look at it, they say, yep, you did solve the math problem. Congratulations. And by solving that math problem, they then take all of those transactions that were in the queue and they basically execute them. And the Bitcoin goes from your wallet to whoever's wallet and so on and so forth. And then that computer that solved the math problem first, they get awarded currently 6.25 Bitcoin as the prize for solving that math problem. And then it starts over again. Every 10 minutes since January 3rd, 2009, with no downtime. It is the highest utilization financial system in human history. And for the first year plus, there was no price of Bitcoin. The first recorded price of Bitcoin was a fraction of a cent. And then it was a huge deal, whatever year it was, 2012, when it hit $1. Oh my God, one Bitcoin is the same as $1. That's incredible. And then it ran up to $100 and then it crashed and that was crazy. And then it ran up to $1,000 and then it crashed to $176 and that was crazy. And it got back up to $1,000 and then 2017 came and it went from $1,000 to fucking $20,000 and that was insane. Then it crashed to 3,100 at the low in December 2018. And now it's ran all the way back up to, it's knocking on the door of 40,000 right now. And people are talking about 100K this year. All of that price movement has happened while the blockchain itself has been doing the exact same thing since January 3rd, 2009. All the price movement is just the world trying to understand what the value of this thing is that they've never seen before, and that we've never had before. There's a lot of beauty to that.
That is an incredible way to wrap to our legal tip of the week. Legal tip of the week. This is sponsored by Smith & Benowitz. It's an employment, personal injury, and class action firm. So one of the new changes here is there is expanded medical leave access for employees at companies with at least 5 people. It's complicated. It's not something that you're going to totally understand. But if you have a question regarding medical leave, call us. You have the number right there. So, Travis, we learned a lot. I learned a lot. I actually use this just as an opportunity to understand Bitcoin. Yep. So thank you.
Sure.
Can you just give us your parting words and where we could find you online?
There's a lot of risk in this. I don't want people to think that there's not risk in it. There's a bunch of ways that Bitcoin could not work out. You need to totally understand that you can lose all of your money.
As lawyers, we're obsessed with qualifying every single thing that we say. So I appreciate you saying
you may
this.
lose all of your money. And that's why it's 2 to 5%.
Yeah.
Right? It's 2 to 5% is the right number. Some of the most famous and well-respected, and like why was Bitcoin up so much in 2020? Why is it up so much already year to date? Some of the most well-respected investors in the world initiated significant positions in Bitcoin in 2020.
The insurance companies are buying like hundreds of millions, right?
Mass Mutual, insurance company, bought $100 million worth of Bitcoin. And took a minority equity stake in a really well-known Bitcoin company. This is an insurance company that was founded before the light bulb was invented. Like this is extremely traditional institutional capital. Pension funds are getting involved. Insurance companies are getting involved. It trades on regulated exchanges and everything like that. And it's just getting started.
But even with that, there's plenty of ways where it could not work out. So take the time to do research,
There's a wealth of information. There's so many great podcasts out there.
I noticed on your website, you actually you have like a rundown of all the good podcasts. Like literally, like every single month, you post links to all the different good podcasts.
Yeah,
so,
and that's right.
Speaking of, so where do we find you on your?
Yeah, one thing I will say, if you want a place to start, the most popular Bitcoin podcast is a podcast called What Bitcoin Did, run by a guy named Peter McCormick.
Okay.
And he has what's called a beginner's guide to Bitcoin. And it's like a 17-part series, but I really highly recommend that for everybody that really wants to actually understand what's going on here. If you do the work, it's probably 20 hours of podcasts to listen to, but if you listen to them, you're going to know a lot more at the end of it. To find me, Twitter's always good, Travis_Kling. If you want to learn about Ikigai, the fund, our website's ikigai.fund. We take accredited investors and qualified purchasers. But if you're interested in that kind of thing, then we're happy to have a conversation. There's a form you can fill out on the website. So
amazing. All right, man. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
We will see you next month, Law Flip.
Law flip, objection, Your Honor. Turn the game upside down. Law flip, objection, Your Honor. Turn the game upside down.
Connect with us on Instagram. We're at LawFlip. If you have any legal issues, connect with us at Smith Benowitz or smithbenowitz.com. LawFlip is produced by Blue Crescent Media. You can learn more about BCM at bluecrescentmedia.com. Our intro music is provided by Penn Practice, and our LawFlip identity was created by Garrett Whiston and Travis Nagel. And lastly, this podcast is made available by Smith & Benowitz for educational and entertainment purposes only. By listening to this podcast, you understand that no attorney-client relationship is being formed between you and Smith & Benowitz or any of its attorneys. This podcast should not be used as a substitute for competent legal advice from a licensed professional attorney in your state. To the extent this podcast may be considered an advertisement, Benjamin Smith is the attorney responsible for this advertisement. Thank you.